I remember the stretch of highway as if it had been carved into my mind, the kind where the trees lean close and blot out the sky, turning even mid-afternoon into a tunnel of shadows. My friends and I were on one of those aimless weekend road trips, just driving, music blaring, windows down, the smell of pine thick in the air. We were laughing and trading stories about old ghost towns and local legends when we saw it, a narrow dirt turnoff that hadn't been on any map. It looked like something locals might use, a trail that cut deeper into the forest. I can't explain why, but something urged me to take it, a mix of curiosity and that inexplicable pull the backroads always have on people like me. The first mile or so was unremarkable, just a winding logging trail lined with pine and oak. The car tires crunched over gravel and fallen leaves. But as we drove deeper, the forest seemed to close in around us. Branches scraped against the windows, and the shadows thickened until it felt as though the trees themselves were leaning over, pressing down. I kept glancing at my mirrors, half expecting to see another car, someone else taking the same detour, but there was nothing. No signs of life, not a single animal, no birds calling. Just the smell of damp earth and old pine, and the low hum of the engine. My friends were still joking at first, but I could feel a tension creeping into the car, a tight knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen. Then we saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the trail. Pale, perfectly still, almost unnatural in the way it held itself. My friends laughed nervously, calling it a hiker, but I don't think anyone else would have mistaken it for a person. We slowed the car, and as we approached, the figure disappeared, leaving nothing behind except the unsettling sense that it had been waiting for us. The sound of the engine seemed too loud in the heavy silence that followed. We exchanged glances, adrenaline buzzing, half laughing but half frozen. I told myself it had been a trick of the light, a reflection from the leaves, but my gut told me otherwise. The trail twisted and turned, and every bend seemed to swallow us further. The trees were darker here, their trunks thick and gnarled, roots snaking over the edges of the road. The gravel thinned, giving way to mud and uneven dirt, and I realized I could hear nothing outside the car. Not a bird, not the wind, nothing. I could feel the forest watching, though I knew that made no sense. Hours, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. Passed in a tense blur until we came to the abrupt end, a sheer drop with no warning, no guardrails, nothing. Just the forest falling away into shadowed depths, a gorge choked with mist. My heart sank, and I slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding over loose rock and mud. I tried to retrace our path, desperate to find that turnoff again, but it was gone. The road we had come in on stretched endlessly, winding in ways I didn't remember. Panic set in, tightening my chest, and my friend's laughter had long since vanished. The air inside the car felt thick, heavy, almost alive. Every turn led us deeper into the same oppressive forest. I caught glimpses of movement at the edge of the trees, shapes just out of focus, darting between trunks, but when I blinked, there was nothing. My phone had lost signal miles ago. I tried to reason with myself, telling myself we must have taken a wrong turn somewhere, that there was some logical explanation. But the feeling in my chest told me otherwise. Time lost meaning. The sun sank lower, and shadows bled into the road like spilled ink. The tires made no sound on the soil, only the echo of our own breathing seemed to exist. And then, as if the forest had decided we had lingered too long, a snapping sound came from behind us, sharp, deliberate. I spun the car around, headlights cutting into the thick brush, and saw nothing. Nothing except the heavy darkness pressing in from all sides. My friends whispered nervously, voices tight and strained, and I tried to keep a calm facade, but inside terror had taken root. Finally, almost by chance, we stumbled back onto the highway. The familiar signs of asphalt and painted lines were a relief, yet the unease didn't leave. Even with the forest behind us, I felt it, that strange weight, like the trees themselves had marked us, like they knew we had trespassed in some silent, ancient space. I haven't driven those roads since. Even decades later, I can't shake the memory of that vanished turnoff, the way it swallowed our path whole, the way it made me question everything I thought I knew about the forest. The strangest part is that I can't tell if we were lucky or cursed. That trail, that vanished turnoff, it felt purposeful, deliberate. The forest didn't just exist around us that day. It was aware, patient, and somehow hungry. Even now, when I drive through Appalachian backroads at night, I half expect to see the trees lean closer, shadows thickening unnaturally, waiting for the next set of travelers foolish enough to follow a dirt path that shouldn't exist. I still see the pale figure sometimes, in glimpses at the edge of my vision, in the corner of a mirror or between the trees on a quiet stretch of highway. I try to tell myself it's nothing, that it's just memory twisting fear into shapes, but I know better. Something was there that day, something that didn't want us to leave. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that it could be waiting for anyone foolish enough to take the turnoff again. The forest took more than time that day. It took my sense of safety, my sense of direction, my innocence. I drive cautiously now, always wary, always watching, because the memory of that vanished turnoff is never far from my mind, and I know that the Appalachians are full of secrets the maps will never show you, roads that lead nowhere, and shadows that linger long after you think you're safe. I remember that night like a weight pressing on my chest, a fog so thick it felt like we were driving through water instead of air. The back roads of the Appalachians had always felt lonely, but that evening they felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl. The mist rolled in faster than I'd ever seen, settling over the trees and the worn asphalt like a gray, suffocating blanket. I could barely see the lines on the road, and the headlights from my car seemed feeble, weak, barely cutting through the haze. My friends laughed nervously at first, joking about ghost stories and the kind of people who disappeared on these back roads, but I felt the unease settling in my chest like ice. We were taking one of those old, winding roads that hug the ridges, the kind where the trees lean together overhead and the undergrowth crowds the edges of the pavement. There was something about the way the fog moved, curling and rolling like it had a mind of its own. And then I saw them, headlights piercing through the gray in the distance. At first, I thought it was another car just passing us, but there was something off. They weren't swerving. They weren't slowing down. No matter how we moved over to the side, no matter how I eased the car forward, the lights kept pace, matching every adjustment we made with unsettling precision. I could make out the driver, a silhouette, human in shape but wrong somehow. Too rigid, too deliberate. My friends tried to laugh it off, but I could feel their tension too. We sped up, hoping to put some distance between us, but the lights accelerated as well. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, and my stomach twisted. The fog thickened even more, swallowing everything beyond a few feet of the headlights, and yet those distant beams stayed perfectly aligned with us, stalking us with a patience that made my chest ache. At one sharp turn, I slammed on the brakes instinctively, tires skidding on wet asphalt. My heart raced, and for a fleeting moment, the road ahead was empty, and I let out a shaky breath. Relief washed over me, just enough to make the next moment feel even worse. When I looked back in the mirror, the headlights had returned, closer now, unwavering. My friends whispered, voices tight and strained, urging me to keep driving, but the fear was a living thing, crawling over our shoulders. Every mile seemed to stretch endlessly, the road curving and doubling back in ways that didn't make sense. We tried to focus on anything familiar, a mile marker, a sign, the curve of a ridge, but the fog swallowed everything. Sounds were muted, our own engines' roar seeming loud and unnatural. I thought I heard faint scraping along the trees at the edge of the fog, like branches were bending and twisting under some invisible weight. It might have been the wind, but the instinct in my gut said otherwise. And the headlights never wavered. They stayed behind us, keeping pace, patient, deliberate. Hours, or maybe it was minutes. Time didn't make sense out there. The road stretched and twisted like a living thing, the fog thickening so much that the trees became formless gray shapes. We were on autopilot, eyes wide, hearts pounding. My friends tried to joke again, but the laughter sounded hollow, unnatural. It was a thin mask over the dread that had rooted itself in all of us. Every glance to the mirrors confirmed the same thing. Those headlights were there, and whatever, or whoever, was driving them knew exactly where we were. Then, suddenly, they vanished. One moment they were there, the next gone. The road ahead looked empty, almost serene, but the silence was heavier than anything I've ever felt. My fingers loosened on the wheel, and I swallowed hard, trying to convince myself we were safe. But the absence of the lights felt worse than their presence. For miles, the fog was unbroken, the road twisting and bending, and every shadow seemed too deep, every tree too close. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next movement, the next mistake. Eventually, the outlines of town appeared, the faint glow of streetlights, the distant hum of civilization. Relief mixed with exhaustion, and we all exhaled at once. But even as we slowed into the first stretch of asphalt that felt familiar, I kept checking the mirrors. And there, just for a heartbeat, I saw them again. Those headlights, hovering in the fog, impossibly far back yet impossibly close, lingering like a predator that didn't want to give up the hunt. I blinked and they were gone. Even now, years later, I can't drive through thick fog on backroads without feeling that same chill, that same prickling awareness that something is watching. The memory of those headlights isn't just a memory. It's a presence, a shadow that presses against the edges of reason. I don't know who or what was driving or why it followed us that night. I don't think I want to. The Appalachians have always held secrets in the mist and the trees, and some roads seem to exist for no other reason than to remind you that you're never truly alone. That night left a mark I can't shake. I dream of the fog rolling in, of headlights appearing in the distance, relentless, unwavering, and always just out of reach. The fear doesn't fade. It lingers in the back of my mind, a quiet, patient thing. And I know if I ever find myself on a foggy Appalachian backroad again, those lights could be waiting, and I would recognize them immediately, because the memory is as sharp and real as the fog pressing against my windshield that night. I remember pulling off the highway almost on a whim, though now it feels like the place called to us. There was no sign on any map, just a narrow clearing in the trees where an old building leaned to one side, roof sagging, windows dark and empty. The air hit us first, thick, damp, heavy with the smell of rot and earth, like the forest itself had been decaying for decades. My friends laughed as we parked, joking about abandoned diners and the kinds of people who might have once used them. But there was a weight to the place, an almost palpable awareness that made my stomach tighten. The building looked deserted, yet every detail suggested life had been here not so long ago. Rust crawled across the metal signs swinging from broken hinges, faded letters half erased by rain. Boards splintered along the floor, and the scent of mold hit the air as soon as we stepped inside. My flashlight barely cut through the dimness, and every sound, our footsteps, the scrape of my boot on wood, echoed with a hollow resonance, as if the walls themselves were listening. I moved forward cautiously, noticing scratches on the walls that were jagged and deep, carved with intent, not random decay. I called out softly, half expecting my friends to laugh, but they were tense, whispers catching in their throats, and the wind answered me instead, rattling the broken windows with a hollow moan. We explored carefully, moving from room to room. Each doorway revealed more decay, more shadows that shifted as if alive. Out the corner of my eye, I thought I saw movement, figures flitting between the trees outside, though whenever I turned my head, there was nothing. My friends joked to mask their unease, but I could feel the tension pressing against my ribs. Something about the place didn't want visitors. It was as though the building itself was a sentinel, a mark left in the woods to warn or maybe to trap. The scratches, the whispers of wind, the shadows all seemed deliberate, like a language we were not meant to understand. We lingered too long, drawn by some mixture of curiosity and unease. I remember stepping into the back room where the floor had rotted away slightly, hearing the wood creak and groan beneath my weight, the smell of mildew and decay stronger than ever. I paused, feeling the presence of someone or something else just outside the thin walls. There was a sharp movement beyond the window, just a flicker of gray between the trees, fast enough that it might have been my imagination, yet it carried the weight of intent. I wanted to call out to see if anyone or anything was there, but my voice died in my throat. By the time we decided to leave, my hands were clammy, and the forest outside seemed closer, more menacing, like the trees themselves had shifted to watch us retreat. As we drove away, the clearing faded into darkness behind us, yet I could still feel the building's gaze on us, a cold, persistent awareness that seemed to linger far longer than it had any right to. The rest stop hadn't just been abandoned. It had been waiting for someone to enter to mark their presence, to leave with the memory of it etched deep into their mind. Even now, years later, I avoid that stretch of forest. The memory of the building, the scratches, the wind that answered, the shifting shadows, is vivid in my mind. I know the forest still holds it there, hidden from maps, a place that thrives on the trespass of strangers. Driving past similar clearings, I can't shake the feeling of being watched, of some silent sentinel tracking each passing car, waiting for the next foolhardy traveler to stumble into its domain. There are places in the Appalachians where the trees are patient, where abandoned buildings are not truly abandoned, and that rest stop is one of them. It's a quiet horror, lingering, subtle, and impossible to ignore once you've felt its presence. The fear doesn't fade. I can still smell that damp, earthy rot in my mind, hear the faint creak of broken boards in the wind. The memory lingers like a shadow across every backroad I drive, a reminder that some places are alive in ways we cannot see, and that curiosity can be dangerous when the forest itself is watching. Even now, I imagine those figures among the trees, darting between trunks, always just out of sight, and I know the rest stop has not forgotten us, and that the woods never really let go. I remember the day clearly, though the memory carries the same unease it did that afternoon. We were taking a backroad someone had mentioned, a shortcut through the forest, a winding path that promised to shave off some miles and offer a little adventure. At first, it seemed harmless, almost inviting. The road curved gently between thick stands of pine and oak, sunlight dappling the surface, birds calling somewhere above the canopy. We laughed at the stories of lost roads and local legends, thinking they were exaggerations. The air smelled sweet, like wet earth after rain, and the ride felt peaceful, almost cinematic in its quiet beauty. But as we went deeper, the atmosphere changed. The trees grew unnaturally close together, their limbs intertwining overhead to form a kind of archway that blocked out the sky. Shadows pooled across the road in a way that seemed deliberate, like the forest was pressing down on us. My phone lost signal suddenly, and when I glanced at it, the battery percentage dropped from 67 to 0 in moments, as though the forest itself had swallowed the electricity. We joked nervously about how the place felt off, but the unease grew quietly, a creeping tension we couldn't shake. The road beneath our tires began to change. Pavement gave way to dirt, then mud, then thin gravel barely wide enough for the car to pass. Every turn seemed steeper, the edges of the road lined with roots and rocks that hadn't been there before. Then, without warning, the road ended. A cliff rose abruptly before us, dropping into a gorge choked with fog. The river below glimmered faintly, its sound distant and muffled, but the drop was sheer, sudden, with no warning signs, no guardrails, nothing to prepare us. The realization hit all at once, and panic set in. I slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding over gravel, and for a moment, silence replaced the roar of adrenaline. My friends whispered, voices tight with fear, and I could feel their hands gripping the edges of their seats. It felt intentional, as though the road had been built only to lead travelers to this exact point. We turned the car around cautiously, hoping to retrace our path, but the road behind us had changed. Every bend seemed unfamiliar, every turn disorienting. It was like the forest itself was shifting, closing off routes we had just driven, forcing us deeper into its grasp. The trees loomed, casting shadows that seemed almost alive, moving at the corner of my vision. I thought I heard whispers, low, unintelligible, carried on a breeze that never seemed to touch the leaves directly. I called out to my friends, but the words died in my throat, replaced by a paralyzing sense of wrongness. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed in a blur. Each attempt to find our way back led to a similar dead end, the road narrowing, terrain becoming impossible, or the landscape twisting in ways that defied reason. At times, I thought I saw movement among the trees, figures darting in the periphery, glimpses of gray or brown, gone as soon as I turned to focus. My friends' panic mirrored mine, their whispers growing louder, overlapping, trying to reassure one another. But none of us spoke aloud the feeling that we weren't alone, that the forest itself was aware of us, guiding, watching, shaping our path. The fog thickened as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, swallowing everything in muted gray. Even familiar landmarks seemed wrong, shifted. Rocks appeared where none had been. The road curved where I was certain it had been straight moments before. I clutched the wheel, knuckles white, eyes darting to mirrors, to shadows, to every hint of light or movement. And through it all, the whispers continued, so faint that I almost questioned them, until I realized they were real. Soft syllables, low tones, unformed words carried on the air, just at the edge of hearing. Eventually, almost by chance, we stumbled back onto a familiar stretch of highway. Relief was immediate, but it was hollow. The tension didn't leave. It had rooted itself in my chest. I glanced in the rearview mirror and swore, for a heartbeat, that the forest seemed to lean close to the road, waiting, patient, silent. I haven't been able to drive those backroads since without a tremor, without scanning the edges of the forest for shapes that shouldn't exist. That road is still there, I know it. It waits, bending and twisting, disappearing into the trees, a trap for anyone who thinks they can find a shortcut through the Appalachians. Even years later, I replay the experience in my mind. The way the light shifted under the dense canopy, the smell of damp earth, the twisting, narrowing road that ended without warning. I can still hear the whispers from the trees, faint as a memory but unmistakably real, and I feel the same weight of being watched, of being manipulated by something that doesn't belong to the human world. It wasn't a single figure or a person. It was the road itself, the forest itself. Patient, deliberate, waiting for the next traveler to lose their way. I tell this story now with a quiet dread that never fully leaves me. The road that led nowhere is more than a misadventure. It's a reminder that the Appalachians are alive in ways we often refuse to believe, that some paths exist to test your awareness, your courage, even your sanity. Every time I drive at night through those mountains, I half expect to see that narrowing dirt path curl out from the trees, to feel the oppressive closeness of the forest, to hear the faint whispers carried on a wind that should not be there. And I know, deep down, that some places in those woods never truly let go of those who wander into them.
I remember that stretch of road like it's carved into my memory, the kind where the trees press close to the lanes, their branches forming dark, twisting corridors that swallow the light. The forest felt alive that night, though I didn't realize it at first. Just the usual backroad quiet, the hum of tires on asphalt, the occasional call of a distant owl. My friends and I were talking and laughing, trying to make the night feel ordinary, to keep ourselves from thinking too much about how isolated we were. But even as we joked, the air seemed heavier, and the shadows cast by our headlights stretched long and strange across the curves of the road. It started when I saw movement. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights bouncing off branches or fallen leaves. But then the figure became clear. Slow, deliberate, unnaturally tall, dragging something along the shoulder of the road. I slammed on the brakes before my brain could even catch up. My friends laughed nervously, saying it must be some drunk hiker wandering home, but the way it moved didn't make sense. That thing, or person, dragged its strange burden with a rigidity that felt almost mechanical, yet disturbingly alive, as if it was testing the space around it, aware of us, measuring us. As we drew closer, the figure turned its head toward us and I froze. The eyes caught our headlights, glossy and unhuman, reflecting them back with a cold, sharp awareness that made my stomach sink. There was intelligence there, a calculated patience that didn't belong in a forest hiker. I could hear my own heartbeat in the silence that followed, loud and uneven, while my friends whispered nervously behind me. We accelerated, desperate to get past, but even as we left it behind, a gnawing awareness settled in my chest. Something was following, something that didn't run but waited, knowing we couldn't slow down, knowing we couldn't escape the road so easily. The minutes stretched into miles, and every shadow at the edge of the forest seemed like it could be it, always just at the corner of my vision. My friends tried to talk, their voices shaky, but the words sounded hollow against the oppressive quiet. I kept checking the mirrors, but nothing appeared, yet the feeling of being watched never left. Every dip in the road, every curve through the trees, heightened the tension, like the forest itself had conspired to make us aware of its presence. The thing hadn't followed in a conventional sense. It didn't chase. It simply existed along the road with us, patient, waiting, a presence that refused to be ignored. Eventually, we reached the lights of a small diner tucked into a clearing, and relief washed over us like a wave. We parked, trembling slightly, telling ourselves it was over. But even under the flickering neon signs, in the safety of other people and cars, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there, somewhere just beyond the forest's edge. The road had marked us, had made sure we remembered. The way it had lingered in the shadows, its deliberate patience, had etched itself into our minds, a memory we couldn't unsee, a warning we couldn't ignore. Even now, whenever I drive backroads in the Appalachians at night, I remember the height of that figure, the unnatural dragging of whatever it carried, the cold intelligence in its eyes. I see the shadows stretched differently in the corners of the lanes and feel the lingering weight of that moment pressing against my chest. That night left a quiet terror behind, subtle but insistent, a reminder that the woods hold more than just trees and wildlife, that some roads cross paths with something aware, and that the next traveler might not be so lucky to drive away untouched. The memory stays with me, sharp, cold, unshakable. Every time the forest crowds a road, every time the headlights reflect off something that seems wrong, I remember the patience in those eyes, the way it waited, and the way I felt it measuring us, knowing we were trying to escape. There was no chase, no roar, no scream. Just awareness. And the realization that sometimes, the woods themselves are enough to make you feel hunted. Even on a road you thought you knew. Even as years have passed, I avoid that stretch of forest whenever possible. The memory is a shadow on the back of my mind, a quiet pulse of dread. It doesn't need to appear to be real, it only needs to linger, reminding me that the Appalachians are not just mountains and roads, but places with patience, places with awareness, places that remember those who wander too far into their domain. And I know, deep down, that it's still there, somewhere along the roads we thought we knew, waiting for the next headlights to slip past its gaze.